So we'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Laura Lande-Diner, a biotech entrepreneur and former flagship pioneering scientist who has co-founded and scaled multiple life science companies, translating breakthrough science into transformative therapies, and is now advancing next-generation innovations as managing partner at Jefferson Life Sciences. Please welcome Laura Lande-Diner as she delivers her talk entitled Rethinking How We Fund, Build, and Sustain the Next Generation of Therapies.
Thank you. Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for inviting me to speak today, in particular Tyson and Costa. As Tyson mentioned, I'm today managing partner at Jefferson Life Sciences, and I'm wearing my investor hat for this talk. But I actually started my career as a scientist, then became an entrepreneur, and then spent the better part of the last 10 years actually as a biotech executive and operator. And so I think that has taught me, I always had the conviction and the ambition to develop medicines that can ultimately help patients. But I also came to appreciate how difficult it is and how challenging it is, not just because biology is hard, but because we have these constructs that Tyson was referring to, that we built to serve needs that perhaps they are less relevant in light of where the technologies are and what the technologies are, such as financing structures, regulatory processes that maybe serve, small molecules well, but they don't serve advanced therapies as efficiently as they could. So the reason my talk is called Rethinking How We Fund, Build, and Sustain the Next Generation of Therapies is because I don't have the solutions, but I do want to point out some observations that I made recently and that are not novel, but I think they are very relevant in trying to articulate what are the levers that we can put more easily and what are things that we need to deal with in order to enable genetic agency. Genetic agency, as I think of it, is the ability of patients to make therapeutic decisions based on their understanding of health or our collective understanding of health, disease, and then what the technologies that are available to them are. And by available to them are, I don't necessarily mean on the shelf in a pharmacy, but where is science today? And what are the things that if they were enabled by the structures and constructs that we have, we could deliver to patients? So firstly, as I mentioned, as I've been wearing my investor hats since January, so not for a long time. But one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about is that, as Dr. Wilson mentioned, usually venture capital firms fund therapeutic developments. The challenge that this has is that biotech innovations take time, and companies don't make money for a long, long time, and yet they need money. And people that invest in these companies, they need returns. Historically, it has always been the case that the length of VC funds is about 10 years. Now, if you look at how long it takes to develop a small molecule from discovery to approval, it's between 10 to 12 years on average. Biologics take 12 to 14, and cell and gene therapies take 14 to 17. Ironically, the likelihood of technical success, the risk that the mechanistic hypothesis is wrong, is lower the more complex the therapy is. But you can see here that it takes longer than the typical VC cycle. That was sort of okay while the IPO window was open and there was M&A, but the moment these two things disappeared, it generated a problem that where there's a duration mismatch in terms of when the VCs need a return and how long it takes to develop advanced things. And this created an incentive to invest in things that are not necessarily more likely to succeed or serve an unmet need, but that generate a return faster. And so the risk appetite then pivoted to things that are more artificial than the technology in some ways. And so the strategic implication for this is that if we could find new capital architectures that support the needs of these more advanced therapies, potentially there would be avenues to enable more and more of these technologies to reach further development stages. I think, for example, at Jefferson, we do have what we call patient capital. We don't need to return capital within 10 years. But I am aware that this is easier said than done, and that it's not enough that one group has this mentality. There needs to be a community that is willing to explore new capital architectures. On the other hand, on the hand of the technology development, I'm sure you are all familiar with baby KJ's story, the baby that had CPS1 deficiency, and together, through a collective effort that involved Penn and a number of companies, and that was orchestrated, within 8 months, this baby received a therapy that was curative. And I think what I wanted to point out in the context of this case is that it is possible to accelerate N-of-1 therapies, but there were 2 things that were required to enable this. One of them, the pooling of technologies and capabilities and knowledge that resided in different entities. So there was the medical knowledge, there was the technical ability to synthesize a drug, there was the delivery piece, and all of those things were not nucleated in one company. They were enabled by this collaboration between all these entities that are listed here, and that's very important. The second piece is a unique regulatory structure that allows the drug to be allowed to be given to a patient in a reasonable amount of time. And so the strategic implication of this is that it is possible to find alternative avenues to enable advanced therapies to reach patients faster, but it requires for us to rethink regulatory process and also to rethink IP, in fact, right? How we store knowledge, how we store capabilities, and how we share them. And the challenge here, and this is what I think would be a good context for discussion, is that there's a bit of a tug of war between the different constraints that we have as a field. And again, this is a very, very challenging space because the companies that develop the technologies don't make money for a long time. They need money, investors need to make returns, and there are all these regulatory constraints, and science is hard, so we cannot do it faster necessarily. On the financing side, there is a requirement for long-haul investments. IP matters because that's ultimately how drugs are sold, so that it's conflicting with this sharing of capabilities and pooling of technologies, but really sharing of capabilities and pooling knowledge is what enables therapies to be accelerated, because if every company is siloed, it will inevitably take longer. And then thirdly, one of the challenges that were brought up earlier today is that by virtue of therapies being more personalized and precise, the markets will be smaller because you are not doing one-size-fits-all therapies. And so how do we reconcile this with the fact that we need to generate returns and with the fact that companies are usually not created to serve the needs of a very small amount of people? And so this is what I wanted to leave you with problems, not solutions, but hopefully some thoughts about ways to think about this differently to enable more patients to get access to better therapies. So there is a path, again, easier said than done, but there is a path to think about alternative financing structures that can support this. There is at least the understanding that the consolidation of different technologies and pools of knowledge will catalyze more rapid discoveries and development. And then I think, again, the regulatory structures that we have today are maybe not a good fit for the technologies that we need to get through FDA today. So maybe rethinking how what constructs we have on the regulatory front can also act as an accelerator. And I'll be happy to have a conversation to discuss other potential solutions as well. Thank you.